He loved her for 6 years. Gave her peace, gave her space. But when she walked back in, hoping for forgiveness, she found a stranger, one who no longer needed to raise his voice to destroy her, because the man she betrayed didn't scream. He planned, and his silence, it wasn't weakness. It was the beginning of a revenge she never saw coming. Before we begin, please like this video and subscribe Relation Tales. We're grateful for each and every one of you. Let us know where in the world you're tuning in from. We'd love to hear from you in the comments. Let's begin. The morning Kellen Hayes opened the door and watched his wife, Ivy, walk out with 2 small suitcases. He didn't say a word, not because he had nothing to say, but because deep down, something inside him had already let go. Ivy didn't cry, didn't even flinch. She looked at him with the kind of expression that suggested she'd been rehearsing this moment for weeks. "I need space, Kellen," she said, voice level. "Time to figure myself out." He gave a nod, silent, calm. Not because he agreed, but because he wouldn't beg someone to stay who didn't want to. She turned, walked past him, and the soft click of the door shutting behind her echoed like a funeral bell. Kellen stood there for a moment, towel still in hand from drying dishes, heart oddly still. The silence afterward felt louder than any argument they'd ever had. He went back to washing plates, like it was just another Tuesday. He wiped the countertops, folded the laundry, swept the floors. The stillness of the house settled around him like dust, but not the kind that chokes. It was the kind that blankets, muffles, masks. At the office he showed up early, stayed late, didn't miss a beat. The company's CEO even called him Mr. Dependable. At the gym, his focus was sharp. At the grocery store, he knew what he needed and didn't linger. Routine became his therapy, silence, his sanctuary. Friends checked in. His younger sister, Lily, called almost daily. "Are you okay?" she asked one evening, her voice cautious, unsure if she was talking to a man in pain or a man pretending not to be. "Really okay. I'm adjusting," he replied, "one day at a time." But Lily wasn't buying it. "You two were together 6 years. People don't just turn that off." "I'm not turning anything off," Kellen said. "I'm just not chasing ghosts." His best friend Sean stopped by unannounced, carried a 6-pack and that look only childhood friends can wear. Half concern, half curiosity. "She left and you're vacuuming?" Sean asked with a lopsided grin. "Not even one meltdown?" Kellen shrugged. "Would that help?" Sean gave him a look like he was waiting for the real emotion to appear, to crawl out from under the composed shell. But Kellen just stared blankly at the muted television. He didn't owe anyone a What no one realized was this. Kellen had felt Ivy slipping away long before the suitcases appeared. The warmth in her voice had cooled. The texts had shortened. The eye contact had vanished like dew under the morning sun. So when she finally left, he didn't break. He just adjusted. Quietly, efficiently. The way someone patches a leak in the roof before the rain starts. One night, while folding laundry, he found one of Ivy's sweaters tucked deep in the drawer. Pale blue, worn at the sleeves. It had always been her favorite. He held it for a moment, waited for something to stir. A pang of nostalgia, a flash of hurt, but nothing came. Just calm. The next day he packed her remaining things into boxes. One for clothes, one for toiletries, one for books she always meant to read but never did. He labeled them all, put them in the garage, and still no tears, no phone calls, no begging for closure, until Tyler came over. It was a rainy Thursday, the kind of evening when people cancel plans and stay in. But Tyler didn't. He showed up at Kellen's door, hair damp, expression tight. "Dude," he said, as soon as Kellen let him in, "I saw Ivy." Kellen raised a brow, but said nothing. Just let him speak. "She was at Dockside Bar 3 nights ago, with some guy." Tyler hesitated. "They weren't just friends, man. They were laughing. Real close, already a thing. Like they'd been a thing." Kellen didn't flinch. He just reached for a glass, filled it with water, took a slow sip. Tyler waited for a reaction. Anything. Finally, Kellen said, She asked for space. That's what she's doing with it. That doesn't bother you. Kellen met his friend's eyes. It used to, but I ran out of room to care. Tyler looked at him, like he didn't recognize the man standing there. You sure you're not just numb? Kellen set down the glass. I'm sure I'm done. Tyler didn't push further. He knew when a man had made peace with his own pain. But what Kellen didn't say, what he hadn't told a soul, was that he'd known about Ivy's affair before she ever packed her bags. The subtle lies, the longer work dinners, the new perfume she claimed was a free sample. He had watched it unfold, had traced her locations, had even stood outside the cafe one afternoon, just far enough to see her hand resting on another man's thigh, across the table. But he hadn't confronted her, because Kellen wasn't the kind of man to rage or crumble. He was the kind of man who waited, and planned, and built his revenge with precision, not with shouts or slaps, but with silence and patience. Because while Ivy thought she was walking out on a man who didn't care, she had no idea she was waking up the one part of him that never forgets betrayal, the part that doesn't forgive, the part that makes sure you remember exactly what you lost when it's too late to get it back. 3 weeks after Ivy walked out, Kellen answered the door mid-shower, towel still damp around his neck, to find her standing there. Same woman, different energy. Her hair, usually pristine, was now carelessly tied back. Her lips parted slightly, like she had rehearsed something and forgotten half of it. Her arms were crossed, not in defense, but as if holding something broken inside her ribs. Can we talk? She asked softly. Kellen didn't move from the doorway. He didn't invite her in, didn't smile, just stood still as if waiting for her to realize the absurdity of her return. I've been thinking, she continued. These past few weeks being alone, it made me realize how much I miss us. You, everything we. I thought I needed space, but her voice cracked. I think I just needed to understand how much I loved you. Kellen didn't blink. Loved, he repeated. I love you, she corrected, eyes brimming. Still do. He let the silence stretch until it cut her. Then without a word he turned and walked to the kitchen. She followed him inside cautiously, like a guest in a house she no longer recognized. Everything was different, cleaner, colder. Even the air felt curated, minimalist peace replacing the chaos they once shared. He opened a drawer, pulled out a silver key and held it out. What's this? She asked, confused. Garage, he said. Your boxes are in there. Clothes, books, the rest. Her breath hitched. Kellen, what? I thought we were. There is no we, he said, calm but definitive. Not anymore. She stepped forward, blinking fast. You're really going to throw away 6 years? Just like that? I didn't throw anything. You did. When you traded truth for whatever that was at dockside. Her face flushed. You had me followed. No, he said. You just forgot that the world is small, and that lies don't stay hidden. Especially in a city where I know everyone who matters. Kellen, she whispered. It wasn't serious. He was just a mistake. His eyes locked on hers, unflinching. Then you should have made fewer of them. She opened her mouth to speak, but he raised a hand. You don't get to rewrite what happened. Ivy's voice trembled now. We built a life here, this house, these plans. This house, he said, cutting in. It's mine. Always was. Your name's not on the deed. You moved in. You moved out. And you can move on. She stared at him like she was trying to find the version of him that used to tuck her in at night, rub her shoulders after long days, kiss her forehead in the quiet moments. But that man had died in silence. You didn't even ask why I left. She tried one last time. Don't you want to know what was wrong? I already knew, he said. You needed attention. You needed a thrill. And you thought I was just a placeholder. Until you found it. Tears finally escaped down her cheek. You were the only thing that ever made me feel safe, she said, voice cracking. Kellen didn't soften. Then why'd you look for danger? Ivy shook her head, stepping back. You've changed. He walked toward the door and opened it. No, I just stopped pretending I didn't see who you really were. She hesitated, hoping for one last plea, one last crack in his armor. But there was none.
He gave her 10 minutes to load her car and leave. Outside she carried box after box alone, her tears soaking the sleeves of the hoodie she used to steal from him on winter nights. There was no dramatic goodbye, no music playing in the background, just the sound of cardboard shifting, of rubber soles crunching gravel, of a door that would never open for her again. Kellen stood inside, watching without expression, because this wasn't heartbreak, this was justice. And it had only just begun, because while Ivy thought this was the end of her punishment, Kellen's revenge had just taken its first breath. By the time Ivy pulled away from the house for the last time, her face streaked with tears and the trunk full of regrets. She didn't know the worst had only just begun. Kellen didn't celebrate. He didn't drink. He didn't post cryptic quotes on social media like the emotionally wounded. He sharpened his silence into precision, and began the slow, methodical destruction of the life she thought she could run back to. He started with the simple thing: shared accounts, closed, streaming services, passwords changed, mail forwarding, already handled. But that wasn't revenge. That was housekeeping. The real plan was much deeper. Kellen had always kept a quiet file, a personal document, not stored on any cloud, just in case things ever fell apart. He never expected to need it. But the contents were real. Photos, screenshots, bank transfers Ivy thought he didn't know about. A receipt from a boutique in Denver she visited when she told him she was at her cousin's baby shower. A boarding pass from a last-minute weekend trip that wasn't logged on her shared calendar. And then there was the email, the one she had carelessly left minimized one night on her laptop, when she thought he was asleep. Subject line: Miss Friday already. From a man named Travis Decker. He never opened it. He didn't need to. He'd already seen enough. Kellen was patient, but he wasn't passive. He didn't scream when betrayed. He built. A week after Ivy's departure, he scheduled a quiet meeting with a local attorney, Camilla Rhodes, whose specialty was not family law but corporate rebranding. Because while Ivy had been figuring herself out, Kellen had also been reinventing himself. And now, with nothing to tie him down emotionally, he was doubling his hours and working on the software project that had been simmering on the back burner for a year. An AI predictive logistics tool, something he once told Ivy he was afraid to pursue because they'd need more stability first. Now he had all the time and silence he needed. The team grew. Investors responded. Within 2 months, he had signed a deal that placed him in the same economic bracket Ivy once said he was too cautious to ever reach. Meanwhile, Ivy was spiraling. It started small. She texted, "Hey, just wondering how you've been." No reply. Then she called. Once, twice, left voicemails. "Kellen, I know I messed up. I know. But people make mistakes. Please don't throw everything away." He blocked her. When that didn't work, she drove to his office, only to be stopped by security at the front desk. His name was on the building now, not hers, not theirs. What Ivy didn't realize was this: she had burned a bridge, thinking she'd always have the boat. She tried to rebound, reached out to Travis, the same man she'd laughed with at the bar. But Travis had his own motive. When she told him she was pregnant, he offered support, but only for the child, not for her. He left town a week later, moved back to Arizona to be with his ex. The baby? He promised child support, nothing more. Ivy's world caved in, and still she thought maybe, just maybe, Kellen would step in. So when she saw his best friend Sean at the grocery store, she made her move. "Does he ever talk about me?" she asked, eyes hopeful. Sean hesitated. "You don't want the answer to." "I need him to know I'm sorry," she said. "He already knows," Sean said. "He just doesn't care anymore." And that was worse than hate. That was annihilation. Back at Kellen's house, no, his home, things had changed. The lighting was warmer, the furniture rearranged, the walls freshly painted. The scent of cinnamon hung in the air, not Ivy's rose vanilla perfume. One Saturday afternoon, Lily came over and sat across from her brother on the back porch. "She came to my apartment," Lily said gently. Kellen looked up. "Ivy?" Lily nodded. "Wanted me to talk to you. Said she's desperate. She's pregnant." "Kel." His face didn't move. "Not mine." "I know," Lily said quickly. She admitted that. "But she's scared. Alone. Said she made the biggest mistake of her life." Kellen turned his gaze toward the sky, soft clouds rolling overhead. Then he said with the same calmness that had now become his signature, "Some mistakes don't come with second chances." Lily placed her hand over his. "I'm proud of you. You didn't just survive this. You grew." He gave her a small smile. "I didn't want revenge." "You sure?" she asked. He looked her in the eye. "No, I wanted clarity. Revenge just happened to be the side effect." That night, Ivy sat in her apartment, smaller, colder, lonelier than any place she'd ever lived, holding her stomach and wondering how she had gone from everything to nothing. But the truth was, she had never loved Kellen the way he deserved, and now she would never get the chance again, because the man she betrayed didn't need to ruin her publicly. He didn't need to ruin her at all. He just needed to let her live with the full weight of knowing she ruined her. The air in Ivy's apartment was always cold, no matter how high she turned the thermostat. The windows rattled in the wind, and the floorboards creaked when she paced at night, restless, wide-eyed and haunted by a name she could no longer say aloud without her chest aching. Kellen. It had been 3 months since the last time she saw him, since the garage, since the final dismissal that shattered everything she believed she still had a grip on. She looked different now, thinner, slower, shadows under her eyes that even makeup couldn't hide. The pregnancy wasn't difficult physically, but emotionally, it hollowed her, not because of the baby, but because of the silence. No one came to check on her, not Travis, who had ghosted her after a brief conversation about co-parenting, not her old friends, most of whom had faded when the glow of her relationship with Kellen disappeared, not even Kellen's sister Lily anymore, who had tried, but after Ivy showed up at her office a second time uninvited, Lily gently drew a line. "I can't be the bridge anymore," she had said. "You don't understand, he was my home," Ivy pleaded. "No," Lily replied softly. "He was your blessing, and you burned it." The words stuck. Every ultrasound, every doctor's appointment. She went alone. She'd sit in the waiting room scrolling through photos of her and Kellen during happier times. Her favorite was one from Colorado, him smiling under a snowfall, arm around her waist. She looked back then like she had everything, because she did. And now, she had regret. Kellen meanwhile was flying to New York. His software company Axis Forge had just been acquired for a 7-figure deal, and he was invited to speak at a major tech conference. In just under a year he'd gone from quietly dependable to one of the most respected new names in predictive automation. But success didn't change him, it clarified him. He bought a new house, smaller but full of light, filled with things he loved and none that reminded him of Ivy. A record player, a stack of crime novels, a coffee maker that brewed exactly how he liked it. He even started dating again slowly. He wasn't in a rush. He didn't need someone to fill a void. He was whole now. One Sunday morning, as he jogged through a park near his new place, he spotted a familiar figure sitting alone on a bench, wrapped in a gray sweater that swallowed her frame. It was Ivy, pregnant, pale, lost. She hadn't seen him. And Kellen stood there for a moment, breathing in the cold air, frozen by a flood of old memories, but not pain, just clarity. Then he turned around and jogged the other direction. He didn't owe her anything, not words, not comfort, not closure. He had given her everything once, and she gave it to someone else. Ivy noticed him too late, just a fleeting glimpse of his back as he disappeared into the trees. She stood up halfway, heart racing, but her legs couldn't move fast enough. She sank back down, because deep down she knew it wouldn't matter what she said. He wasn't turning around. Later that night, Ivy sat on the floor of her apartment, one hand on her stomach, the other holding a piece of paper. It was a letter, to Kellen. She'd rewritten it a dozen times. Each version started the same, "I'm sorry," but they always ended with "please come back." And every time she folded it, sealed it, addressed it, she tore it up before she could send it, because she knew what he'd say. Nothing. That was the final revenge. Kellen didn't have to ruin her. He simply had to remove himself from the life of someone who had underestimated the depth of his love, and the strength of his absence. The rain that morning was relentless. A cold drizzle soaked the sidewalks and blurred the skyline. As Ivy stood outside the Axis Forge corporate tower, an envelope clenched in her hand, her coat unbuttoned and fluttering with the wind. She didn't have an appointment. She didn't care. Her hair was wet, her shoes, but she waited in the shadows, just outside the revolving doors like a ghost, desperate for absolution. Kellen exited just after noon, tailored charcoal coat, leather briefcase in one hand, Bluetooth in the other. He looked like someone who belonged to a life Ivy could no longer recognize. She stepped out into his path. He stopped. Their eyes locked. Neither of them spoke for 5 seconds. 5 seconds that felt like the world held its breath. Finally, Ivy spoke, voice shaking. I just wanted to give you. She extended the envelope, thin, handwritten, no return address. Kellen didn't take it. He looked at it, then at her. What's in it? He asked quietly. My truth, she whispered. He looked at her belly, round now beneath her coat. The child was due soon, probably weeks away. He shook his head once slowly. It's too late for that. Kellen, please, I'm not asking you to come back. I need you to read it. I need you to know I wasn't trying to hurt you. You did hurt me, he said flat. You just didn't think you'd have to watch me get better without you. Her lips parted, but nothing came out. She looked at the ground, then back up. There's a name in there, she said. For the baby. I want to give him your last name. Kellen didn't move, he wasn't angry, he was exhausted. You want my name on a child that isn't mine? He asked. No, she said quickly. Not legally, just symbolically. For him to know what kind of man I should have loved, right? To carry your strength into the world, even if I could. It was desperation. It was grief. It was a woman finally drowning in the weight of her own betrayal. I don't need a legacy in your child's life, he said softly. I needed loyalty in mine. Then almost gently, he took a step back, and turned away. The envelope fluttered to the ground. He never looked back. Ivy fell to her knees, not because of the pain in her body, but the finality in his silence. She stayed there long after he disappeared into the rain, until a security guard approached, offering to call someone for her. But there was no one to call. That night, she sat by the window of her apartment, cradling her stomach, whispering lullabies through her tears. She would raise her son. She would try to teach him about strength, about kindness, about consequences. But there would be a name she could never say again without her voice breaking. Kellen. Months later, in a sunlit cafe in Boston, Kellen sipped coffee with a woman named Brooke, a colleague he'd met at the tech conference. They talked about books, dogs, quiet mornings. She had warm eyes, easy laughter. There was no rush, no pressure, just two people beginning again. Brooke excused herself to take a call. Kellen leaned back in his chair, watched the city breathe outside the window and smiled. He had survived the fire, and now he was blooming through the ash.